Good morning and welcome to Stroke of Genius Podcast Survivor Experience. I'm your host, Aaron Avila. Today's guest, I don't think really knew that having strokes was not a competition, but her name, the stroke survivor interviewing today is named Beverly Hall. She was born and grew up in Youngstown, Ohio. She had her first stroke in 1999, but she's had 28 TIAs, people. And I tease it because I just joked around there this morning and telling her it's not a competition. But let's get into it. We only got half an hour, so let's take it.
The Stroke of Genius podcast, hosted by brain aneurysm and stroke survivor Aaron Avila, sharing the experiences of survivors and CEOs. This is your destination for inspiration.
Well, good morning, Beverly.
Good morning, Aaron. Nice to see you.
Great to see you, honey. Really is. Now, I mean that joke because 28 TIAs. And in case that you don't know what TIA is, known as a mini stroke or transient
Ischemic.
Yeah, thank you. I know Beverly is having a little bit of audio issue, but I'm hoping you can hear and understand what she's saying. Because, you can't go through what she's been through and not have a great story. So, Beverly, how are you? Where are you coming to us from? Where are you coming to us?
I'm coming to you from Lenore, North Carolina, where we retired in 2020.
In 2020, so your strokes before you, no, after, no.
Before I retired, I had my strokes.
Oh, and you moved after stroke. Why don't we just get right in? Can we link on half an hour together? Just get right. What was your life? Please do me a favor and describe your life before your stroke.
Sure. I was a pastor. I was just appointed to my first full-time appointment as a pastor in the East Ohio Conference. I was serving 6 years there. I had gotten married to my second husband. My first husband died of cancer in 1992. And my second husband and I met online, and we had gotten married in 1994. And I was getting ready to go to Oxford Brookes University in England. So we were getting ready to pack up everything, and I was getting ready to move. My husband was going to live with my father, who was living in Youngstown at the time, because Jerry was a reservist and could not leave the States because of his military duties. And so he was going to live with my father and take care of the bills and everything. And I was going to England to do Ph.D. research. So we were getting ready to move. That morning, before my stroke, we were having an intimate moment, and I said to him I couldn't breathe. I could breathe, but that was the only thing I could think of to say. And he recognized the symptoms of a stroke, so he called immediately, and they got me in the hospital, and they recognized the symptoms. I had a massive hemorrhagic stroke, which is only 25% of the people. They were able to figure out what was going on and took care of me. They thought it was stress, because it was an incredibly stressful period in my life, with moving and going to another country and all that. It affected the left side of my brain, so I was totally paralyzed on my right side. I couldn't talk. I couldn't remember even my name, let alone my dissertation. But after the initial problems and the dysphagia and all the other issues that I had to begin with, I was able, after I got out of the hospital, to stand with help. I was able to work a wheelchair and to talk and begin to write. I continued to finish up my appointment at the church that I was serving, and then went ahead and did 2 part-time jobs as a fill-in pastor at 2 other churches in a wheelchair. My father drove me around to do visitation and took me to the churches. Jerry, my husband, was very supportive, and my daughter, who was graduating from high school, was able to help with the yard sale and everything that we needed to sell most of our furniture, and then helped with the storage unit to get everything else put away in our storage unit. And the people of the church were very nice to us to take care of us and clean the house and get us packed up and everything. And then I went to England. The doctors told me not to go. I arrived in England in a wheelchair. 2 years later, I went off the plane carrying my own luggage. And I did that because I knew if I didn't take the scholarship at that time, I would never go back. I would never do what I wanted to do. And I did. In England, I couldn't drive, obviously, especially on the opposite side of the road. I would have been very discombobulated. So I ended up not driving for 2 years, which was a good thing. I walked a lot because in England, especially downtown Oxford, you don't drive cars and private cars in downtown Oxford anyway. So you had to take buses and then walk and take other buses and walk. And people would drop me off at bus stops from the village that I lived in. I was about 7 miles outside of Oxford proper. And then I cleaned houses for a living while I was there. And that helped with my rehab because I needed to do rehab. But there wasn't anything formal that I could do because I was not under the medical institution that I didn't have any insurance anymore because I was no longer a pastor. And so my insurance went away when I was no longer a pastor. I was a student. And it took 6 months before I could get on the British healthcare system. So it took a while. So I cleaned houses for a living, and I cleaned 9 houses plus the village hall. And that helped a lot and got me in top shape as much as I could. And it got me in homes and allowed me to have a support group of people that really, they're lifelong friends. I've gone back several times and visited in their homes and stayed with them and enjoyed their company. And I still keep in touch with them on Facebook and things like that. So
Beverly, I mean, this is amazing. Are you, let me make sure I understand this correctly. So you had the stroke, and then you start getting all this traveling and active and start doing you're still house cleaning. I mean, I just find that amazing.
yeah, my second stroke was in 2000 while I was in England. I fell off a ladder. I was cleaning a chandelier and I fell off a ladder with a second stroke. I crawled out of the house that I was cleaning and a person that I also cleaned houses for saw me and picked me up and took me to the John Radcliffe Hospital. And they looked at me and they said, "Yep, you have a history of strokes. You probably had a stroke, so don't pick up anything over 10 pounds, and you probably shouldn't be alone for the next 6 weeks." Um, they didn't do any x-rays or MRIs or any tests. They just said, "You've had a history of stroke, so you probably had another stroke." I felt like I had a stroke, so I thought, yeah, that's probably it. It was less severe than the first one, but I couldn't lift anything. I could, my right side was affected again. And then when I got back to the States, I started having these mini strokes. I was appointed a full time pastor. Um, I was working 12, 14-hour days full time. And pastor's work is never done really. You get called out to hospitals in the middle of the night and all that stuff. You just never know when you're going to be on call. And it was a very stressful church situation, a lot of different dynamics in the church. Anyway, I was there 5 years and very stressful, disconcerting divisions and things like that. And anyway, I survived that situation, but a lot of stress, and I had 28 TIAs. In the meantime, I had several different neurologists, and my regular doctor kept putting me onto different neurologists who kept looking at me saying, "Something's not right. You don't have normal strokes. This is not a normal stroke pattern." And so finally, one doctor who was a specialist said, "I think I know how to get to the bottom of it." And he gave me an angiogram, and they found out that I have Moyamoya, which is a rare artery of the brain disease. So I was diagnosed in 2004, and they gave me 2 years to live.
Wow.
At
Well,
that,
let me before you keep going, because man, what a fascinating story. But I wanted to bring something up that probably isn't talked about too much in the stroke community, but it happens because now during sex, you had your stroke. I knew another person also had the stroke during sex. And that, let's face it, as your blood pressure goes up. And but I think what I've been in wheelchair for 12 years. At what point did you leave the wheelchair and begin to walk? Or did you walk all the time and only use a wheelchair in long distances?
um, I couldn't walk at the beginning for about 4 weeks. And then I gradually was able to walk slowly. Um, they had a ramp at the church, but no ramp to get up to the podium. And because I'm so short, I have to stand on a step stool to get behind any podium. My motto is "Have stool, will preach anywhere, anytime, any place." So I had a stool, and so I thought, okay, I my last sermon at my first church that I was leaving before I went to England, I stood up on my last sermon and held on to the podium, but to just preach. I couldn't stand up for the rest of the service. I couldn't stand for the hymns or the prayers or anything. I did everything out of the wheelchair for that. But They gave me a standing ovation, which was great.
I mean, really, Beverly, you're what the definition of relentless. And if I had to guess, a lot of that do be said, God, you sir, you don't sit down, you keep going, but you're probably one of the most active people I've known as after the stroke. I mean, you're traveling, you're preaching, I mean, it's just amazing. That's amazing. So here you are going through, you had a stroke. Did you know what a stroke was before you had one?
Yes, I had an uncle who probably had Moyamoya, and he died from his second massive hemorrhagic stroke. And he and I had a lot of common factors. He died in 1972, and they didn't name
And
Moyamoya
what age did he die? Can I interrupt you?
in 19. He died in 1972 at age 57, and they didn't name the disease Moyamoya until 1978. So we couldn't determine if he really had it, but all the factors were there, and it sounded as if he probably did have the disease, and we just didn't know it. It is hereditary, so we think one of my daughters have it, but hopefully she won't have a stroke. But right now, it's looking pretty good because she's had seizure disorders, and that's part of it. I had in absentia seizure disorders when I was a child, and nobody thought anything of it. They thought I was daydreaming or I didn't get enough sleep. And here it was a seizure disorder that nobody knew about.
Well, do me a favor, Beverly, and take a minute and tell people what Moya is because I've never heard of it before.
Yeah.
What is it?
It's a rare artery of the brain disease. It narrows the arteries of the brain. And what ended up happening is in the angiogram, you see a puff of smoke. You don't see any white arteries. The arteries are supposed to show up on the angiogram, and they just showed up as very little cluster at the base of the brain.
Wow.
And the rest was a puff of smoke on the left side. And there was a little gray line on the right side of my brain. Had that continued to go down the right side, I would have died. The doctor that diagnosed me said there wasn't anything that they could do about it. And I didn't give up. I went online and typed in Moyamoya. And when I typed in Moyamoya, I ended up coming up with a video of two women from Wisconsin going out to California to see Dr. Gary Steinberg, who does Moyamoya surgery almost exclusively. And I wrote to him, and he said, "Send me your records." I sent him my records. He said, "Get out here as quickly as possible." And I said, "I'd just gotten to a new church, and I needed to do Lent and Easter with this new church." This was in February that I was talking to Dr. Steinberg. And so April, the very first week in April was Easter. And he said, "Get out here the next day." And I went out the next day. My husband was being called up active duty Iraq. And so he couldn't go out to California with me. My oldest daughter had been diagnosed with cancer and was getting chemo. She couldn't go out to California with me. And my youngest daughter was defending her Ph.D. And so she couldn't go out to California with me. So I said to my church family, I need somebody to go out to California with me. And this lady raised her hand and said, I'll go out to California with you. And she did. She came out to California. She missed her husband's 60th birthday, their wedding anniversary, and Mother's Day to come out to California with me for 4 weeks. She did all the driving and was just wonderful. She kept in touch with everybody. They had a prayer vigil for me. They did a healing service for me before I left, and I had two brain surgeries while I was out there in 4 weeks. And the 5th week I was back and I did a wedding that weekend and preached.
You're amazing, Bev. I gotta be honest with you. I'm just amazed what you're doing after a stroke, because I've helped thousands of stroke survivors around the world, and there's so many that have a fraction of a stroke you did, right? And they give up. They just put a period in their life and just wait to die.
Yeah.
They don't even. I think you were more busy after a stroke than you were before. So I didn't mean to laugh. It's not funny, but it shows you're relentless, and that you really kept going, and it didn't stop you. And it reminds me of you. Remind me of the saying, "Life is 10% what happened to you, and 90% of how you respond."
Yep. Yeah.
And you responded to your stroke amazing. I mean, you kept living. For me, stroke was just nothing more than the tools God chose to use to bring me here with you today. So I'm very grateful for that. Believe it or not, we're down last 8 minutes of the show, but I want to touch on something I'd like to know about you. But so here you had your stroke. What? You wrote a book.
Well, I did.
Somewhere you're squeezing running a book and all that.
I actually didn't write a book. I was in a book. I was chapter 4 in a book called Just Say Yes to Life. I'm the chapter that's titled Never a Quitter.
That's right. That's who you are.
And they compiled a group of us stroke warriors and decided to tell our stories. I am one of 2 who have Moyamoya in the book, and that's wonderful. The more we tell about Moyamoya, the better it is, because if you're younger and have Moyamoya and have a stroke, it's important to get it treated and have the surgery rather than waiting later. And more doctors are putting it off, saying you need to wait and see. And that's so important to get it done quickly and get it to where you can move on with your life. I would not be here if I would have waited. I would have been dead.
So, are there any symptoms that the audience can, if they have Moya? Is there any symptoms you could tell them that are known symptoms of the disease?
Yeah, like I said, if you have any kind of symptoms, like if you have a stroke at a young age, and you need to ask why you had that stroke. If they don't know why, then they need to find out. Get an angiogram. If they won't give you an angiogram, at least get an MRI so that they can see if there's some cloudiness in that MRI. they can figure out if you might have this disease that is life threatening. If you've had seizures, any kind of tremors, uh, anything like that, that might give indication that you have a problem with your cortex in your brain, with your blood flow. And
Right.
of course, May 6th is World Moyamoya Day. And so be aware of that and celebrate it, because you need to ask, do you have blood flow in your brain? Always.
But for me, I think really put honest out there for you. That bottom line is listen to your body.
Hmm.
Your body will taught your mind and tell you something is wrong. I have massive headaches. My body would tell me it's serious. I ignored it, played it off. I had a brain aneurysm rupture. So, but if Beverly and I could do it, one thing and raise their awareness and be aware of what your body is telling your mind, because it will taught you. Now, Beverly, I'm gonna bring up the book cover. Is this the book? This is a book that you wrote for, or it's actually a combination of a bunch of different stroke stories, strokes above stories, and it's published by Stroke Awareness Oregon, right?
Yes.
And which Stroke TV Media totally endorsed Stroke Awareness Oregon. And in fact, that's how I met you, is during one of their. But this book, we will what the Beverly and I will put the purchase link and the description of this video. So there, you have to have you said yes to life. And that really is what I mean. You're the epitome. So yeah, you're saying life. So it's not over just because you're a stroke. But Beverly, and we're running on the last few minutes because we're so quick. But I'm curious, what if you was somebody out there, a brand new stroke survivor out there, what kind of a tip or advice would you give a newer stroke survivor?
Take care of yourself. Hydrate always. Make sure you drink lots of water. That's important. But also love yourself. Love yourself as you are. Don't compare yourself with others, because your progress might not seem like progress for somebody else, but it's progress for you. So, again, for me, it might seem like I was standing still for me, but for others, it seemed like I just didn't have anything wrong. But I know that, for instance, when I was trying to work on my doctorate, I would sit in front of my computer and cry because I couldn't remember how to spell the. And, without spell check, I wouldn't have gotten 750 pages of my dissertation written, but I was able to do it. But again, don't ever give up. Don't give up on yourself.
That
And
really is the bottom line, and for all of us, stroke survivors,
yeah,
never
give
give
up.
up.
And don't quit. If you can't go around it, go under it. If you can't go through it, go over it. Just try to find a new creative way of doing something. You can do it. You really
Yeah,
can.
it Beverly reminds you of an inspiration like it's the biggest wall you got to climb is the one you build in your own mind.
Yep.
And I would say stroke survivors out there, new 10, I'm 12 years post or whatever. You are the biggest wall that you've got. Don't say I can't. Just don't give up and keep, like Beverly just said, keep going. Do whatever you need to. Beverly, believe it or not, we're all the time early. I can't believe it. It's been great having you. Appreciate you being here, honey. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so here we go.
Set me on fire.